Welcome to Soccer Morning. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome into Soccer Morning, live from Northern Virginia, where it is snowing again. Good God. Can I just not have snow for like a week? That would be lovely. And yet here's winter, and this is what winter is doing to us. Winter is bringing us a very interesting Premier League title race. We're going to get into that today. We're going to hit the news here in a moment and consider the results from the weekend as they impact the Premier League table. But let me tell you right now that Andrew Mangan from Arseblog will join us on today's program. Very excited to talk to Andrew. Always a good conversation about Arsenal with Andrew. So stick around. After that, of course, we'll have open phone lines for you on a Monday. Lots to talk about in the world of the Premier League, in the world of MLS. A couple of very high-profile moves, including one I just remembered. I did not get into the news here, but I will mention. That's the trade of Harry Shipp from the Chicago Fire to the Montreal Impact, and a surprise move, certainly for Chicago Fire fans, who I saw reacting pretty angrily on Twitter. Whether this will play out well for that team or not remains to be seen. Certainly, a new locale for Harry Shipp may do him wonders with his talent, and certainly. Playing with Didier Drogba can't hurt. All right, let's do the news. Again, lining this up for Andrew Mangan coming up right after we get through the headlines. Premier League results, Arsenal. The aforementioned Arsenal beating Leicester 2-1 at the Emirates. Danny Welbeck coming on to score the late winner for the Gunners. This puts Arsenal now 2 points back of Leicester City in the Premier League table. Spurs also 2 points back of Leicester City as they beat Manchester City, 1-2 at the Etihad. Christian Eriksen scoring an 83rd minute winner for Tottenham as they again stay 2 points back of Leicester City via their win. Leicester City's loss to Arsenal. Liverpool thrashing Aston Villa 6-0 or 0-6 at Villa Park. Chelsea 5-1 over Newcastle. Manchester United falling to Sunderland at the Stadium of Light 2-1 on Saturday. So again, Leicester City on top, 2-point advantage over Spurs and Arsenal. City falling 6 points back. Newcastle, Sunderland, and Villa currently occupy the relegation spots in the Premier League. And obviously, it's not going well for Aston Villa. Sunderland with a win, but they've got some work to do to climb out of the relegation zone. Reports say that Seattle Sounders forward Obafemi Martins is set to join Shanghai Shenhua of the Chinese Super League. He'd be the latest name to move to the Chinese Super League. Obviously, you know about all of that cash that is being splashed. The Sounders have confirmed interest, but deny that a deal is done. Martins is currently not with the team at their training camp in California. Garth Lagerwey saying that they hope to know something by the end of the week. In the meantime, Seattle Sounders fans trying to get used to the idea of life post Obafemi Martins. Big opportunity perhaps for Jordan Morris. Certainly may result in a formation change for Seattle. They had been talking about a 4-3-3. Maybe they go now to a 4-4-2 with Nelson Valdez starting alongside Clint Dempsey. Orlando City has agreed to trade undisclosed amount of allocation money to DC United for the discovery rights to AC Milan midfielder Antonio Nocerino. United previously accused Orlando of tampering with their own efforts to sign Nocerino. Nocerino will join former Milan teammate Kaká in Florida. Again, this is one of those quirks of the MLS rule book that say United has first crack because they put him on a list, and Orlando comes in and he offers him more money, and it kind of throws off all of the negotiations there. On Saturday, the U.S. women's national team secured a spot in the quarterfinals of the CONCACAF Olympic qualifying tournament after a controversial penalty call against Mexico helped them to a 1-0 win. Carly Lloyd's initial penalty was saved, but the Women's World Player of the Year slotted home the rebound to give the Americans the lead that they held on to. The U.S. plays Puerto Rico today in their final group stage match. Puerto Rico comes off a 9-0 loss to Costa Rica, so should be easy picking for the United States. But again, controversial penalty, did not play overly well in that game against Mexico. Mexico made it very difficult for the United States. Did the Mexicans get CONCACAF'd? You be the judge. Certainly, it does seem as though the bigger team, the better team, got the call, the benefit of the doubt in the call in that particular instance. If that was a penalty, it's really hard to make out how much contact was actually made with the ball. Barcelona wows world football in a 6-1 win over Celta Vigo. Messi scores on a free kick to open things up. Then Luis Suarez gets a hat trick, including the hat trick finisher on a pass from Messi on a penalty kick. By the way, that would have been Lionel Messi's 300th goal for Barcelona had he put it home himself. As it was, he made the pass, Suarez finished it, got a hat trick. Ivan Rakitic and Neymar finished out the scoring for the Spanish Giants. Barcelona is now unbeaten in 30 straight matches. They stay 3 points up on Atleti with a game in hand in Spain. This is one of those situations now where people are talking about this being the greatest team of all time. That's obviously a difficult thing to judge in a subjective era versus era type of situation, but damn it, are they not amazing right now? That triumvirate at the top, the obvious play of Busquets these days, this is a team that seems unstoppable. And if they don't win a European championship, if they do not take home the Champions League title this year, people will be absolutely shocked. In fact, I imagine that the odds on Barcelona winning the UEFA Champions League title are very short at the moment because who's betting against them to do it? All right, here we go. Let's line this up. Our friend Andrew Mangan from Arseblog will join us to talk about Arsenal. Could they possibly be Premier League champions in 2015-2016? They are 2 points back. They get that massive win over leaders Leicester City yesterday. Welbeck with the finisher. Let's go diving into some Arsenal here. Premier League. Andrew Mangan from Arseblog. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning. Backheel.com.
Welcome to Soccer Morning. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
All right, here we go. Soccer Morning on a Monday. It is President's Day over here. I'm not sure Andrew Mangan is celebrating President's Day, but he does join us via Skype from Arseblog, of course. Andrew, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. I'm trying to, think of my favorite president, and I don't really have one.
Is that something you've ever thought about in your life? I can't imagine.
Not really.
I
Jimmy Carter had good peanuts, if I remember correctly, but that could be just me.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter, famous for being a peanut farmer. There you go. That's pretty good knowledge. Andrew joins us obviously to talk about Arsenal, and we have to talk about yesterday's big victory over Leicester City, 2-1. Danny Welbeck coming off the bench. What stands out? What's the first thing that comes to mind for Gunners fans in light of that victory, Andrew?
Well, I mean, I think just the circumstances of the victory itself. You know, it's been a long, long time since we scored a late winner like that in a game of that importance, and there was obviously a tension, a nervous tension, excitement in the stadium yesterday. And when they went down to 10 men, Arsenal equalised with 20 minutes to go, more or less. You kind of felt, okay, you know, they've got enough here to get a goal, but 4 or 5 minutes into injury time for a guy who's been out of the game for 10 months with a knee injury to come back and score like that on his first game back, fairy tale kind of stuff. And the reaction to it was absolutely sensational. It was spine-tingling stuff, I have to say. So I think on the one hand, people are obviously delighted on a personal level for Danny Welbeck, but B, just the significance of the victory can't be overstated, I don't think.
No, sure. If you're going to reel in Leicester City, you've got to beat Leicester City when they come to the Emirates. Is this the kind of victory that's going to help this club not shed their reputation, Andrew? Because who cares what we think of them? It's about what they think in that dressing room.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, I think had Arsenal not won that game yesterday, there would perhaps be more doubts among the players. You know, I think we people who live and breathe the game and write about it and broadcast about it and talk about it and live online and all that kind of stuff, we probably tend to analyze things a lot more than the players do. They will look at things simply, you know, your team can win, for example, and people will say, yeah, we won, but we didn't really play that well, you know. The players will be just going, hey, we won.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really all that counts. And I think that's a really good point you make there, is that the Arsenal players might well have harbored some doubts about their own abilities in the final couple of months of the season had they not won that game yesterday, particularly in those circumstances with Leicester down to 10 men. And I think it will give them, or it should certainly provide them with a boost in confidence ahead of what's to come. And obviously what's to come is quite daunting, but you know, you got to play them all at some point.
Tell me if you heard this before, and correct me if this is the wrong way to look at it. Danny Welbeck is like a new signing?
We have heard that before, yeah. Look, you know, it's cliched, but the reason it's cliched is because in certain ways it's true. Like, Welbeck hasn't played all season. He had 45 minutes with the Arsenal under-21s, and Arsene Wenger said he wasn't going to pick him for this game. Only the last 2 training sessions, he was looking so sharp, convinced him to put him on the bench, and you know, ultimately that's a good decision justified by what Welbeck did himself as a player. But you know, at the heart of it, it's true, isn't it? Arsenal are getting a guy who gives them another attacking option, something they've missed at times this season. Another attacker or two on the bench in certain games would have been very useful. He's also a guy coming into a season in February when everyone else has been playing since August and has that accumulated fatigue to deal with. Welbeck has got all he's got is lost time to make up for. He'll have fresh legs, lots of enthusiasm, lots of hunger to make up for the 10 months that he spent out, which is a long time for a footballer. You know, they really feel it as much as fans do. For the players themselves, not to be able to play is extremely difficult to cope with. So yeah, it is kind of like a new signing. And I'm very happy to have it.
You know, I didn't get to really get into the meat of it, but I started reading a piece at Arse blog, as a matter of fact, that sort of talked about, you know, in previous iterations of this team, Andrew, Arsene Wenger would have numerous attacking options on his bench to turn to if he needed a goal. That has not necessarily been the case, certainly over the last couple of seasons, in part because it seems as though those players have picked up a lot of injuries over the course of a season. So particularly at this point in the year, when the games are of obviously crucial and everything counts, every game counts for the same number of points, but you get into sort of this crunch time period of the season, you want to have somebody like Danny Welbeck off the bench, and regardless of his fatigue level, they haven't had him necessarily in the past, or someone like him.
It's true. I mean, look, Arsenal have gone into lots of games this season with a bench of Debuchy, Chambers, Gabriel, and Gibbs, and maybe a couple of young guys, young attacking options who aren't really ready or who it's unrealistic to expect a big impact from. And yesterday, they brought two guys off the bench, England internationals, Theo Walcott and Danny Welbeck. Both of them scored. And that just shows you that, that there's an ability there to bring on players who can help change games. And you look at the way that Arsenal finished with Ramsey and Mesut Ozil, two attacking midfielders as their midfield, flanked by Alexis and Walcott with Welbeck and Giroud up front. It's 6 attacking players. Now, I know Leicester had 10 men, but I think it spoke to the ability of Arsene Wenger to try and win a game in circumstances that he knew he had to take 3 points yesterday. There was no other way around it. So he did have that ability to throw on players who he hoped would make a difference and who ultimately did make a difference.
With the circumstances as they were, as you mentioned, maybe the bench had more defensive options than attacking options, but clearly, in order to go and win a title, you have to play solid defensive football as well, and balance has been an issue for Arsenal. Where do things stand in your mind? Again, playing against, as you said, 10-man Leicester changes the dynamic a little bit, makes it a little less about them breaking down Arsenal or them being able to be as effective as usual on the attacking end. But as the rest of the season unfolds, Andrew, it's going to be incumbent upon that Arsenal defense to play well.
Yes, of course. I don't think you can attack well unless you've got a good platform, a good solid defensive platform, There was perhaps in midfield a bit more control with Coquelin and Ramsey together rather than Ramsey and Flamini. I think that's a partnership that looks like it could work much more effectively than the other two who've done okay individually, but as a duo they haven't really clicked. So. Yeah, the defenders are there. Maybe a couple of worries about injuries at the back because Koscielny went off at halftime yesterday and Gabriel has got a thigh problem. So, there's big games coming up against Barcelona where you would want those guys to be fit and ready, hopefully. But yeah, look, defensively, Arsenal have been all right this season. They haven't been a disaster by any means. I think the bigger problem with Arsenal is that they haven't been scoring enough goals. And that's why having someone like Welbeck back and having someone like Theo Walcott who can come off the bench and score will be just as important.
Is there anyone, we're sitting here, it's the middle of February. We know there's still quite a bit of season left. Is there anyone that you expect to come back in this team that's going to be able to make a difference for them? And is this an issue? Again, Arsenal, criticism of Arsenal and certainly some of the soft tissue issues, injuries that these players have faced. But is there anyone that should be rushing back, or is that the wrong way to look at it?
Yeah, I don't think you want to rush anyone back because, then you risk exacerbating or damaging them further if they're not quite ready. You'd have to look at Santi Cazorla as somebody who would be an influential player in particular games if he gets back, and I think he's due back in about 3 or 4 weeks. But Arsene Wenger said that about Jack Wilshere too. So, those are two guys who could have a big impact. And I don't even necessarily mean in the starting 11 straight away, but again, to be able to bring on players from the bench who have the quality to make an impact in games. And I think you'd be looking at those two. They're the only two who are really out now. Attacking or midfield players who are out. So they're the only two who could come back. Wilshere, I'd be a little more doubtful about simply because we've had a couple of false dawns in terms of his return. He was supposed to be back in December, then he was supposed to be back in January, and here we are. We're going to go into March and he won't be back. So you've got to worry just about his injury situation in general because it's an ongoing thing. Whereas Cazorla's was pretty much a one-off. He was always a fairly robust kind of player. So I think Cazorla would be the first one to come back, and he's definitely somebody that could add something to this team at the moment as well.
You mentioned Koscielny's injury. How anxious should Arsenal fans be about Koscielny? And right now, I guess we don't know much.
No, I don't think we know. I think it was sort of in a collision. He got booked for a fairly hefty tackle on one of the Leicester players, and I think he might have picked up a dead leg or something like that. Hopefully, nothing more serious than that. But until such time as we know a bit more. I think it would be wise not to get too panicked. But, you don't want him to be out for any sustained period, that's for sure.
Question from Robert, listener Robert out in Los Angeles. He wants to know how you imagine that Wenger is going to handle what's coming. Hull City in the 5th round of the FA Cup, then obviously Barcelona in the Champions League 3 days later, and then Manchester United on the weekend.
Well, I mean, I think he's going to make some changes for the FA Cup game.
Sure.
No question about that. He'll rotate the squad as much as he can in a way that will allow him to win the game because, Arsenal have won the cup 2 years running. They don't want to give it up. And I think at this point of the season, momentum is so important. In every game, even if you are rotating your squad a bit, momentum is really, really important because it gives you that confidence and belief to take it into the next game. You're not taking a step backwards to try and take another step forwards in a big game. So I think we'll see him rest some players ahead of the Barcelona game, which is obviously going to be absolutely massive. He'll play his strongest possible 11 against Barcelona, and after that, then I think he'll worry about Manchester United. I don't think he'll be thinking about Man United just yet, but certainly he'll be looking at this weekend as a way of rotating, giving some fringe players some playing time, making sure that those players, because if they play well, it can have a good effect on the rest of the players. They have to keep their socks pulled up and keep performing to keep their place in the side. So, that's where he'll be looking. But I don't think he'll be looking as far ahead just yet to Manchester United.
Sure. How do you? I mean, obviously that's the next league match, Andrew, and of course, being in second, 2 points back of Leicester with the prize certainly in sight, an opportunity. How do you view that particular match against Manchester United? Because obviously we know the history between the two clubs. Manchester United on a downswing at the moment, having difficulty losing to Sunderland on the weekend. But then we get into wounded animal. Then we get into certainly raising their game maybe against an Arsenal team who is going for a title that they would typically see themselves, in a fight for.
Look, I think at this point of the season, every single Arsenal game is a must-win game until such point as you put yourself enough points clear at the top of the table where you can afford to drop a couple of points, and that's not where Arsenal are. So it's very much one game at a time territory. They've got to go to Manchester United with the belief that they can win that game and take those 3 points and keep the pressure on in the title race. After they play Manchester United, deal with the next game and then do it like that. Arsenal did win there last season. If you remember, Danny Welbeck scored a goal, so he's like a new signing. He could come back and do that again.
Certainly, that would be big for Arsenal. All right, so again, the three different fronts at this point in the season. We've not seen Arsenal maybe this close to the Premier League prize. I mean, obviously it's your club, Andrew. You can tell me if I'm wrong about this. When's the last time Arsenal was really dancing with the notion of winning the title at this point in the season, and then also having, probably the most difficult challenge in the Champions League possible, and being still in the FA Cup that they've won twice in a row?
Well, I think you look back at the 2012-13 season, and Arsenal spent a lot of time at the top of the table that year. They spent more time at the top of the table than anyone, but fell away in the last third of the season and ended up finishing fourth, I think. So they've been there or thereabouts. But when you look at this particular season, there's no Manchester United in the title race. There's no Chelsea in the title race. Leicester are top of the table. Manchester City are playing poorly, and they have a manager who is essentially a lame duck. They've made him a lame duck, and whether that's having an influence in the dressing room, we don't quite know. Tottenham, of course, are there or thereabouts. They're on level points with Arsenal, but again, this is unfamiliar territory to them. They've never been, as far as I can remember, for a long time anyway, they've never been in a title race. So there's a unique pressure that comes with being in that race. Arsenal haven't dealt with it well in recent years, and it remains to be seen if Tottenham and if Leicester can deal with it. That's why I wouldn't rule Manchester City out, because they've been there, they've gone the distance. But look, it's obviously not in Arsenal's hands, but it's a good chance. It's a good chance for them. Whether the other things, whether the Champions League or the FA Cup could be considered distractions, I don't know. I just don't think you can afford to look at the games in that way. You've just got to take the games as they come, try and do your best, and power on through. So it's going to be very interesting. these final couple of months of the season, Arsenal have got big players. They've got very good players, and it's how those players, I think, really perform in these final couple of months of the season. You're thinking of Mesut Ozil. Alexis Sanchez hasn't quite done it yet. He hasn't come back to life, really. We've got Aaron Ramsey who could step it up a little bit as well. Theo Walker. There are players there who can drive Arsenal to this title, but they're going to have to come together in a very cohesive way, and that hasn't been the case for a lot of this season.
I don't want to do this, but based on what we see with Barcelona at the moment, Andrew, and I mean 6-1 Celta Vigo. Okay, Arsenal's a better side than Celta Vigo, probably by a wide margin. But people are talking about this potentially being one of the greatest teams ever, certainly in a modern context. If Barcelona throttles Arsenal, what kind of impact does that have? I mean, obviously this is over two legs, but in the first, if they really take a hit, if it's a significant margin that they lose by to Messi and Neymar and Suarez, and obviously there's sort of no shame in losing to one of the best sides ever assembled. What does that mean for Arsenal's the confidence we just talked about them earning a little bit more from this win over Leicester?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest, because I think when you're a top flight footballer, when you're somebody like Alexis or Mesut Ozil, you want to play games against Barcelona. You want to play against the best teams, and you want to, in a way, judge yourself against them. That if you can do it against Barcelona, then doesn't that give you confidence when you're playing West Brom or Norwich? That kind of a thing. With no disrespect to those clubs, I'm just trying to put it in the perspective of a player. It's how well they could compartmentalize those results if those results go badly, and it'll be to do with how they go badly. Arsenal lost twice to Chelsea this season. That could have been very damaging for confidence, but in both cases, Arsenal were down to 10 men. They lost men to red cards, so it becomes much easier to say, okay, well, that's why we didn't get the results in those games, because, well, basically we were playing for 10 men for both of those games. If, however, you give 100% and you get the runaround from Messi, Neymar, and Suarez, and you get spanked 4 or 5-0, I think it can be quite damaging for confidence. So circumstances will play a part. But maybe Arsenal can do something to Barcelona that other teams don't do to them in La Liga as well. There's a lot of attacking talent there. They do have goals in the side, and they've got to go out and think that they can get a result against a team like this. Whether they can or not remains to be seen. But football, as this season has proven, can surprise you.
Yeah, they're not going to play the game on paper. We know that, Andrew. They're going to have to run out there for 90 minutes and see how it comes out. And yes, there is absolutely a chance that Arsenal, and it wouldn't be. Let's be honest. It wouldn't be a massive shock if Arsenal managed to pip Barcelona, to 1-0, 2-1 at home, and take that back to Spain. Whether or not they could finish it out is maybe a different question, but I guess this game is not the next game. We're still a week away from it. But when you look at what they are going to do against Barcelona at home, I mean, do you sit back? I mean, do you try to absorb Barcelona's pressure? Do you attempt to take the game to them, or do you attempt to apply pressure to the ball and watch them pass it around you? I mean, how do you handle Barcelona at this point?
Jason, if either of us knew that, we could write a book.
Yeah, we wouldn't be sitting here, would we?
And sell it to opposition or sell it to managers across Europe. I don't think there is any specific way to deal with the quality that they have, because it's not as if they do one thing exceptionally well and you stop that one thing. They do about 50 things brilliantly. And it's just it's how you react. Yeah. I mean, obviously you want to try and be defensively secure. You want to cut out the ball as much as you can to the players who are going to cause damage. Suarez is the finisher. Neymar and Messi, obviously great goal scorers too, but perhaps a little bit more creative than those guys. Whether or not Arsenal can apply enough pressure at the other end of the pitch, where maybe that's where Barcelona aren't as good. You'd be hard pressed to say that their defense is as good as their attack.
Sure.
And that's not to say that they don't have good defenders and a good platform themselves. So it's trying to maybe find a balance between having to sit back and soak up what Barcelona do when they come at you, but also try and cause them problems yourself, and try and discombobulate them a little bit. They maybe won't be used to playing a team who could perhaps be as physical as Arsenal could be. Arsenal could be a lot more physical if they're allowed, perhaps by the referee. Arsenal do have pace as well. Alexis is super quick, Walcott very quick, Oxlade-Chamberlain quick. So that might be something that they choose to try and exploit. But I just don't know exactly how you're supposed to stop three players of that quality playing as well as they are at the moment. They're absolutely terrifying, I have to say. Yeah. But that's the joy of European football. These are the teams that you have to play, and we'll see how it goes.
Let me bring it back to the league here, Andrew, and ask you to put on your partisan Arsenal hat, which I'm sure you're wearing a lot of the time, and just outline for me what it feels like and for how Arsenal fans feel to see Tottenham right there, to see them right now ahead of Arsenal. Based on goal difference and challenging in their own right for a title. I mean, it's been a long time with Tottenham sort of teetering on the edge of maybe being a Champions League qualifying type of team versus, as 5, 6, 7, and maybe Pochettino's figured out a way to make this team play up to their capabilities. So Arsenal being their biggest rival and being right there, it's got to be unique in I'm not going to say a good or a bad way. I'm going to let you fill that part in.
Yeah, look, it hasn't happened before. If there's been an Arsenal-Tottenham battle in recent years, it's been for the top four. And when Arsenal have been battling for the title, it hasn't been against Tottenham. So, yeah, I mean, it is unique in that sense. I would like, obviously, for Tottenham not to be where they are.
Sure.
Simply from a partisan Arsenal fan's point of view. It's always much more entertaining to me when they do badly. But they are where they are because they've got a good manager. I think, for the first time in a long time, they've actually got a good manager. And not only that, they've got a good team. Rather than having some good players and one or two guys who can make a bit of a difference in some of the games, they seem to be very cohesive as a team. So, again, as I spoke about, it's the pressure. How does the realization that you're fighting for the Premier League title affect you? Do players freeze? Do they find that pressure too much to take? What happens when they start up in Europe again? They're in uncharted territory, and that's to take nothing away from where they are now. But it is a different thing when you're in there at the top of the title race. And I guess from a neutral point of view, it makes it very exciting to have the two North London clubs scrapping it out. There's a North London derby coming up here. In a couple of weeks' time. That's going to be very, very intense. So, yeah, I mean, I'd obviously like them to fall away, but I think they provide a genuine threat.
I may have to ask you this after the season is over, and obviously it's going to be dictated on who finishes on top of the other, and certainly who wins the title. It being this close for both sides. If Arsenal wins a title and Tottenham is right there, having been in the mix all the way down to the final couple of weeks of the season. And I imagine, again, an Arsenal triumph means over Tottenham is always wanted and desired, but also, again, historically speaking, I think, in retrospect, maybe 10 years down the line, like, what an amazing season that was, going up against our biggest rival for a title. But we know how this usually goes. Usually it's please go get in the gutter down there where we want you to be. All right, to take this to a regional perspective over here, Andrew, we talked about this player before, Joel Campbell, having been out on loan many times. I mean, we've seen this with Arsenal players in the past, particularly CONCACAF-based Arsenal players. I remember Carlos Vela. He's gotten a chance. He's proven himself to be dangerous in spurts. I imagine he's going to have a role to play down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of the guys, for example, that will play this weekend in the FA Cup against Hull City. I think you can probably read something into the fact that, despite the fact that he's done very well and probably exceeded expectations this season, you can probably read something into the decision Arsene Wenger has taken in the last couple of games to play Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain in the position that he was playing Joel Campbell. I think he probably has more faith in the long-term potential of Oxlade-Chamberlain than he does Campbell. I think he sees more of a footballer in Oxlade-Chamberlain than Campbell. Oxlade-Chamberlain has struggled this season, but he scored last week, and I think the decision then had to be made, right, do I reward him for scoring by dropping him for a player that in the very long term I'm not 100% convinced about? And I think that's kind of where Arsene Wenger is with Joel Campbell. I think he likes him. He's a fighter. He works hard. But I think he thinks he's probably a bit more limited than Campbell or than Oxlade-Chamberlain. So I think that's why he's gone with Oxlade-Chamberlain in the last couple of games. But we have seen time and time again how injuries, how players can come from nowhere to make a big impact in seasons. And I think Campbell has already played a decent part this season. I'm sure he's going to play more between now and the end of the season. But I do think that just the balance has tipped again in favour of Oxlade-Chamberlain. A month ago, 6 weeks ago, you would have said for sure that Campbell was the guy who was ahead of him, and that was evident in the team selections. Now it's Oxlade-Chamberlain who's getting ahead of him in a game yesterday that Arsenal had to win against the top of the table side. He had a choice between Campbell and Oxlade-Chamberlain, and he chose Oxlade-Chamberlain, and I think that's informative.
Yeah, I think it's we don't know what's happening in training, obviously, and we can judge by individual match performances and try to glean why any manager does anything. But clearly this kind of rotational attitude, certainly the swapping of one player for another over large portions of the season. Campbell's a starter for a while. Okay, now you're being replaced by Oxlade-Chamberlain. This is what management is, and this is what's ultimately going to determine how successful any club is down the stretch towards the title, but certainly our Arsenal. We're talking about the general issues of injury that they've faced over the last couple of seasons as they've tried to get back to the top of the mountain, and the issues of reputation and of psychological fragility, and here we go, Andrew. The best you can hope for as an Arsenal fan, I imagine, is the fight all the way down to the end.
Yeah. Look, it is, I think I said this to you, a few minutes ago, that it's one game at a time territory. Arsenal just have to take these games as they come, adjust and adapt their squad depending on the opposition, depending on the injuries, depending on who's fit, who's in form, and just, look at every game as a must-win game. That includes the ones against Barcelona. I know it sounds a bit reductive, but you've got to approach them like that. And then, of course, when you get into the final few games of the season, the pressure cranks up. All kinds of things can happen. You think of Liverpool a couple of seasons ago, who looked set for the title, and basically a mistake from one of their most experienced players cost them the league title. And those are the kind of things that can happen when you get to that end of the season, and it's who can stay on top of those, and who can make fewer mistakes, and who can just score those decisive goals. So it's going to be fascinating. It really is. It's going to be a great end to the season, and obviously I'm hoping Arsenal can manage it better than anyone else.
There you go. Andrew Mangan from Arsblog. Hopefully we'll be able to check in with you over the course of the rest of the season, Andrew, and see if Arsenal can march their way to their first title in over a decade. I can't believe it's been that long, Andrew.
Neither can I. But I'm going to go off now and eat some peanuts in memory of Jimmy Carter, who's not dead even. I'll still eat the peanuts.
Did have a cancer scare, so there is that. We'll hope that Jimmy is okay. Eat your peanuts. Andrew Mangan from Arsblog. Very good stuff there. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll answer your phone calls here. Soccer Morning, backheel.com.
Welcome to Soccer Morning. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
All right, we're back on Soccer Morning, President's Day edition, Monday, February 15th, 2016. Phone lines are open, 646-832-3909. Again, it's snowing again, which I just can't deal with anymore. I'm ready for winter to be over. Didn't the stupid marmot or whatever see his shadow? What is that thing called? Is it a groundhog? What? There's like 6 different names for groundhog, right? That was like 2 weeks ago. What the heck, groundhog? Where's spring? I'm ready. I'm ready to get out there and have some warm weather. That too. But also the MLS season's coming up very shortly. A couple of weeks away. You have a couple of teams getting ready for their Champions League matchups. 4 teams, as a matter of fact. Some interesting moves around MLS right now. Again, I hit on a couple of the big ones this morning in the headlines. Obafemi Martin's potentially going to China. That's reported by the BBC as done. Seattle says it's not done. We'll see. Something in the neighborhood of $3 or $4 million for Obafemi Martin to jump to Shanghai Shenhua. Now, what's interesting to me about this potential move is it seems to be below the spending standards that the Chinese have set. Now, I don't know about Shanghai Shenhua's particular situation. Maybe they don't have as much money to spend as everybody else, or maybe they blew their wad on 1 or 2 other players. In fact, I believe, if I read the story correctly this morning, that they don't have any open foreign player slots. So they're going to have to drop somebody before, or sell somebody on before the end of their window, which I think is the 27th or 28th of February. I think their window goes all the way to the end of February over in China. You can see a list of the foreign players and the open slots on the Wikipedia page for the Chinese Super League season 2016. So, and again, whether or not this is completely accurate or not, I'm not positive. But Shanghai Shenhua, it's actually Shanghai Greenland Shenhua, has Freddie Gorin, Giovanni Moreno, Avram Papadopoulos, and Demba Ba as their four foreign players from outside of the region, and then Tim Cahill is their Asian player. So they don't have an open slot, but they are courting, apparently, Obafemi Martin. So one of these guys is getting sold. Where's he getting sold to? How are they going to come close to making their money back? I don't know what they paid for Freddie Gorin or Demba Ba for that matter. If you look, I don't know that every club, and this is the odd thing, and I know we talked Chinese Super League a couple weeks back, and sort of got our teeth into the situation here, where this money is coming from, the fact that so much of what's happening in China is being dictated by the fact that the Chinese premier loves soccer. The guy in charge of the country loves soccer and wants people to put more money in soccer, and these companies who own these clubs are obliging. But not every. I can't imagine every club has a ton of money to just go spending in the player transfer market. So who knows who's a player here and who's not. And apparently these open slots don't actually matter. Again, maybe until the window closes, and we see if some of these teams are going to drop some of their players. Just as an example, one of the teams that has been active is hold on one second. I got a pronunciation guide that a kind listener sent over to me, Christopher Dodds. So I'm going to use this to my best. Jiangsu Suning has Joe, Ramirez, Alex Teixeira, and Samir. So those are their 4. Samir is a Brazilian-born Croatian player. I don't know if you've heard of him. That's one of the teams spending money. Are they going to go out after spending all that money onto Alex Teixeira, prying him away from a potential Liverpool move? Are they going to spend more money? Are they going to spend more big money on a player? One name that has been recently connected to a Chinese move is Juan Mata of Manchester United. That just popped up today. I saw that out there. And considering the way things have gone, anytime a player's connected, you got to assume that he's going, because there is no fear of spending when it comes to these teams. One of the teams that last couple of years has actually been spending is Guangzhou Evergrande. Guangzhou Evergrande Taobao. And they have Alan Carvalho, Ricardo Goulart, Paulinho, and Jackson Martinez with Kim Young-won as their Asian player. There's only a couple teams with completely open slots. You have Shiduajiang Everbright with an open spot. You have Hubei CFFC with an open slot. You have Hangzhou Greentown with an open slot, and you have Guangzhou R&F with an open. Oh, and I missed one with an open slot, and then also Changchun Yatai with an open spot as well. All right, so China's going to be in the mix, is what we're saying, unless some of these teams just don't have the same kind of money as their as some of their rivals in this league. I'm looking at you look at the foreign players on some of these teams, and they're not overly impressive in some cases. Liaoning FC has Michael Thwaite, an Australian, Asani Lukimia, who is Congolese, Ibrahima Torre, and James Chimanga as their foreign players. Okay, so you know that's not overly impressive. Nelly, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey, Jason. So I want to think about the positive of Martins going to China.
Okay.
And I was thinking about it last night and talking to a few friends. When Martins came into MLS, I think he was 27 or 28. His career was not doing that well. You know, he had good years with Newcastle. And then he came to MLS and he played really well. I mean, he played well with Dempsey. So I like this. China's obviously looking at our league. China's obviously buying good players. So I like to think that China here is willing to take one of our best players in MLS and pay him big bucks to play in their league. So what I'm thinking here is MLS is now becoming more of a, hey, come play over here, we'll revive your career, and somebody's going to come and pay for you. We've seen examples of Keane come over here and revive his career, Giovinco, and I'm thinking Dos Santos maybe came over here with the same mentality. I'm struggling in Europe, maybe I'll go to MLS, score a lot of goals, get called up, and maybe the European team will look at me.
Sure. I mean, look, I don't think there's, and you're pointing out something that's interesting to me, Nelly, and that's MLS becoming, instead of a league of last resort or a league of last big paycheck, which it certainly is for some players. Steven Gerrard's not looking for another move. Beyond that, though, if you want to continue to be that league of last resort, fine. You want to keep paying older players, one more big paycheck, fine. If they have name recognition, I sort of get it marketing-wise. But the transition happens and the league moves forward when MLS stops becoming a league of last resort for some players and now becomes a league of jump-off potential. A league of, again, like you're saying, some players taking it as an opportunity to either rehabilitate their career or get some, find a comfortable place to play and regain their form, and then move back and move on and move bigger than they have before. Now, is China a bigger move than MLS for Obafemi Martins? In terms of prestige and perception, I would call it a wash. In terms of money, absolutely it's a bigger move for him. And let's be honest about this, and it's not cynicism, it is practical appreciation of the shortness of a player's career. Players should get their money. If you can get your money, get your money. I mean, Obafemi Martins has a bad reputation because he seems to be a gun for hire. But, come on, what is he supposed to do?
Right. And I think a lot of MLSs may take that as a pitch to players in Europe, bringing younger guys who are not starting in the starting lineup, who are not getting the opportunity, maybe talking to them and saying, hey, come play with us on loan 2 or 3 years. European teams are looking at us. European nations, I think even Pirlo said it once in an interview, that in Italy, when you think of North America or CONCACAF, you think of MLS. So I see this as, hey, our other leagues around the world are looking at MLS. Players are going to see this like, hey, if I go to MLS and play well, I may have a shot to come back in Europe. I mean, we're getting younger guys now from Europe. We're getting national players that are kind of on the verge of getting into the national team. So that's the positive side of looking at it. You know, Martins was a heck of a player here in the league, but now his improvement that he's done here is in a way going to pay off for him financially.
Yeah, sure. And it'll be sad to see Obafemi Martins go from an MLS observer's perspective, if only because the guy has been so much fun to watch with Clint Dempsey, and been, nearly an MVP in this league. But beyond that, come on, you move on. And here's, for me, the more interesting thing now is if Obafemi Martins does move on, is what happens with Seattle. Do they turn to Nelson Valdez and ask him to handle the forward load alongside Dempsey and shift their midfield, or do they give Jordan Morris the keys to the car from the very beginning? And I don't know that that's going to happen.
I think it's pretty much leaves it up to Jordan Morris being in the starting lineup, right?
There are other ways. There are other ways to handle it for Siggy Schmidt. It's going to be interesting. Again, it's going to be interesting to see. And here's the reality of it. I mean, again, from a Sounders fan perspective, you may not like this deal, but it's going to be hard for any MLS team to say no to that much money. What is interesting here and what's being discussed, I think, up in Sounders land is how does the money come to bear on the club? In other words, how can they spend it? Now, my understanding is that you're not going to get any money to use against the cap from the transfer. That there's not. All right, so it actually is laid out here by Jeremiah O'Shan at Sounder at Heart, if you're looking for an explanation. What makes Martin's decision to move to the Chinese Super League even tougher is that the Sounders almost certainly will not receive any sort of allocation money windfall. Why? Because the Sounders would have needed to recoup the fee they paid to secure Martin's services. Now, Martin's technically paid on his own buyout. Okay, so basically, Martin's bought out his contract at Levante. The Sounders paid him back for that buyout. So it's not a transfer fee, but it is sunken cost. They are putting money into they invested in Obafemi Martins to get him to be able to sign a new contract with the Seattle Sounders. So that and in addition to that, they obviously paid him a significant salary. The Sounders effectively paid a €3 million transfer fee, which was about $4 million at the time, and an additional $6.5 million in salary. About 5.2 million of which would have been over the cap. In order to get allocation money, the Sounders would have needed to secure a transfer fee of somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 million. So in other words, the Sounders would have had to recoup everything they spent on Martins in order to get money to use against the cap in MLS. So that's a consideration here and a troubling thing from the Sounders' perspective. But the team will be able to use, I think it's 2/3 of the fee, on their infrastructure, on their academy, on soccer costs that are not related to salary budget. So, is that worth it? I don't know. Make the call yourself.
Right. And last year, Seattle was looking at Ivica Olic, the 36-year-old Croatian.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's kind of old, but maybe a replacement.
There's got to be somebody out there. There's got to be somebody out there right now, Nelly, that they could pick up that's going to give the. I don't know. I mean, it's tough because there's no lead time now. They need to figure out how to bring it, and this may be a summer signing. They may have to line something up that's only going to take place in the summer and have to try to figure out a way to make do until then. But you would want somebody who was in more of the Martins mold, right? You would want somebody who's coming into the league at 27 or 28, at the high, in their prime, ready and willing to contribute to the Sounders, and obviously make a bunch of money. That's the enticement is the money, in addition to, it's a nice place to live or something.
They may just wait until the summer transfer window give Morris a chance to start and see how he does with Dempsey.
Well, yeah.
That's what I see happening. Maybe go in the summer and target a few players that they think they can get in the summer transfer window when the European leagues end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they also have the Champions League. They got that coming up in a matter. It's a week away. I mean, it's essentially a week away. So losing Martins with a week to go before the CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals begin is really not ideal at all.
All right. Well, thanks, Jason.
Appreciate the call, Nelly. 646-832-3909 is the phone number here on a Monday. Again, I know you're all chilling for President's Day. Probably lots of you off, don't have to work. Maybe the kids are home from school and you have to entertain them. I understand how that goes. I do. But give me a call if you got anything on your mind. I know Jeff is listening. A day off from work means I can honor President's Day by listening to Soccer Morning live for a change. Yeah, you can also call me up, Jeff. Okay. All right. Whatever. 646-832-3909. So we've touched on Obafemi Martins potentially moving on to China. Let's talk about, there's two other big moves in MLS that are definitely on the radar. One is Antonio Nocerino joining Orlando City. This to me is more interesting. Not only does it obviously help Orlando City bolster their roster, he's a very good player. He's probably going to walk into the starting lineup. But it's also about that breaking of the rule by Orlando City, which ultimately saw them end up with the reward. Maybe this sends a message to the rest of the league. If you're willing to step out and break the rules, you will recoup. You will get rewarded for it. But it remains to be seen what kind of allocation money that they are giving up for Nocerino and whether or not the league is going to ding them further. I would be curious to know, because I can't imagine MLS is going to sit idly by and watch Orlando City break the rules that are meant to prevent a bidding war and get the player because of a bidding war. Essentially what the story is that DC United had Nocerino on their discovery claim list. They made an offer. Nocerino was set to sign. Orlando City came in and said, hey, no, we'll give you a couple $100,000 more. Maybe not knowing what United offered. Maybe not even, I don't know. But for whatever reason, Orlando City decided they had no interest in playing the discovery claim rule game and went in and made an offer and ultimately spoiled the negotiations between DC United and Nocerino. The story is, again, this is all reporting, secondhand. I'm not there. I don't know exactly, but the reporting goes that Nocerino really was very close to signing with DC United or close to accepting that offer before Orlando spoiled everything. So we'll see if there's a punishment. The other move that is definitely worth talking about here this morning is Harrison Shipp being moved from the Chicago Fire to the Montreal Impact. Harry Shipp, homegrown talent for the Fire, played in the Chicago Fire organization for a long time. Before moving on and playing at Notre Dame, he played, I believe, all 4 years at Notre Dame before signing with the Fire. It put him behind the curve a bit. Now, maybe he needed the maturation. Okay, maybe he needed that period. Maybe he needed 4 years of college soccer to get ready. Certainly, Bobby Clark has a stellar reputation as a college soccer coach who gets kids ready to play pro soccer. I mean, the Beaslers are just another example of players who went to Notre Dame, came out ready to play professional soccer. And people I think people in Chicago have said that Harry Shipp needed those years, that he wasn't ready at 18. He wasn't even ready before he came out of Notre Dame to be playing at a high level. But he did impress once he arrived with the Fire. He only played 2 seasons there, but he did relatively well. He showed some creative ability. He showed a spark that we hadn't seen from a young American player in a while at the time. It's 2014, obviously. There are new young American players coming through. But Harry Shipp looked like someone that could be a centerpiece of the Chicago Fire moving forward. Not just because of his ability, but also because he's a hometown kid. Don't you want hometown kids? Don't you want to send the message that hometown kids have an opportunity to play with a hometown team? They've shipped him on. They traded him to the Impact for allocation money, of course. And what this means for the Fire and Harry Shipp is going to be very fascinating in 2016. Now, if you want a sense of how Harry Shipp feels about all of this, he did post a letter to Chicago and Chicago fans on Twitter yesterday. Or maybe this was Saturday. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to put in words. Last few hours have been extremely hard. When I was told out of the blue that I would no longer be a member of the Fire, I immediately broke down and started crying. It was totally shocking and overwhelming. This club and this city have meant everything to me, not just for the past 2 years, but since I started following the Fire over 15 years ago. And let me stop here and reiterate how important, cool, amazing it is to have a league now that is old enough that there are kids who don't remember a time when their team, their local team, did not exist. That doesn't mean they all attach themselves to their clubs the way that Harry Shipp did to the Chicago Fire. Some kids in Chicago are probably Arsenal fans and don't give a crap about the Fire. That's fine. But there will be kids like him. And that's important to the growth of MLS. And again, I wonder if there's damage done when you trade a kid, a hometown player who loves the club as much as Harry Shipp. It's a business. Things happen. But man, I know this is a business, speaking of, and nothing is personal, but this is inherently personal for me. I went to games at Soldier Field, at the temporary stadium out in Naperville, and throughout the Blanco era at Toyota Park. I even went to practices at Lake Forest College whenever I could convince my mom to take me. Hold on, that's the, let me just get these pages in order here. My passion in the past 2 years was to help make soccer relevant again in Chicago. This is what got me out of bed every single morning. I wanted to look back 10 years from now and be proud of how I was able to contribute to the growth of this club and its interaction with the city of Chicago. I wanted to continue to be a role model for kids growing up playing in Chicago. There was no single part of this job I liked more than being able to relate to these kids and give them a realistic end goal to dream for. Unfortunately, all I was able to contribute was 2 of the statistically worst seasons in Fire history, and that genuinely breaks my heart more than you could imagine. I'm sorry that I was unable to do more for the city, because if anyone understands what this city deserves in a soccer club, it is me. This is heart-wrenching stuff. I mean, this is, if you're a Fire fan, if you weren't angry about Harry Shipp being traded before you read this, I imagine this gets you a little bit more worked up, because again, not just another player. It's a player from Chicago who dreamed about playing for the Fire, and now after 2 seasons has been flipped. He's talking about the rest of this, talks a little bit more about the players and the locker room and the guys he's going to miss. With this door closing, I'm grateful to the Montreal Impact and the city of Montreal for giving me this next opportunity in my career. Fortunately, I have a new outlet to direct my energy and focus, and I plan on making the most of it. Can't wait to meet my new teammates, blah, blah, blah. Gives a shout out, Go Cubs, World Series 2016. The Bears need Von Miller and Alshon. Not Von Miller. You can't have Von Miller. That's my team. Anyway, all right. He's basically throwing out his Chicago love at the end. Harry Shipp, now a member of the Montreal Impact. We'll see how that goes. I wish the best to Harry Shipp. I like him as a player. There was some discussion as to whether or not he was overrated in the aftermath of this trade, or is overrated by fans of MLS. I think Harry Shipp is potential, and he has yet to express all of it. That doesn't mean he's going to find it. It doesn't mean he's not overrated on some level, but I think it's very difficult to judge Harry Shipp based on the last 2 seasons of Chicago Fire soccer, which were abysmal. Absolutely abysmal in so many different ways. All right. Let's wrap this up. It is President's Day. You're all chilling. I get it. We will step aside. We'll come back tomorrow with another episode of Soccer Morning. Thanks again to our good friend Andrew Mangan of Arsblog. If you are an Arsenal fan or just want to read things about Arsenal, Arsblog is a must. I mean, come on. So good. And with them now chasing a Premier League title, you might as well put it in your bookmarks or whatever people do these days. Do you dig it still? No? Soccer Morning, backheel.com. We'll talk to you on Tuesday. Bye.